You know, it's incumbent on me as the host of this week to say that was my fault. Someone mistook my thumbs up for something else, and it was really important that the governor of Florida meet our wonderful governor, Governor Greg Abbott. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. You
Good to be here with you.
You know,
they were standing for you anyway.
Okay,
Kevin Roberts is entering the room. Let's stand up. Let's give him a big show.
All those people you saw running out of here were the TPPF staff, Governor. No, all kidding aside, thanks so much. It's a delight to have you here, spend a little bit of time in the back. I was about to tell you before Governor DeSantis came back that last night, I'd tell this to a fellow Longhorn, we had Larry Kudlow voluntarily giving the hook'em sign to Brooke Rollins. Isn't that awesome? That's right. So, Governor, you've been kind with your time. Obviously, it's the start of the legislative session, and we're going to get into that. You told me backstage you have a lot you wanted to pass along to our audience. I told you that we're primed and ready because the guarantee that TPPF has made to our friends here is that we'll leave here more optimistic tomorrow than we got here yesterday, and I know that's your mindset always. I know before we want to get into some of the specific legislative session that you and I have both share an interest in making sense of what happened last week in Washington, D.C. I just wanted to pitch to you with that initial kind of difficult question because right now we're all looking to our leaders to give us some sense of what true north is and really kind of specifically what we need to be doing in order to make sure that our civil society is healthy.
Well, you say it's a difficult question, and it is a difficult question that we need to be thoughtful about what the answer is. And the answer always should kind of begin with our Constitution. Because the fact of the matter is, the founders of our country, they looked ahead and they realized that one of the founding principles upon which they wanted to enshrine in our Constitution was the right to protest against government. But if you pull out the First Amendment, you will see where it guarantees that right to protest, they added the word peaceably. That's because in addition to your First Amendment right to protest, our founders also wanted to ensure that we were a nation that was based upon the rule of law as opposed to the rule of men. Hence, protest is expected in the United States of America, but it must be done peaceably. Violence and mayhem are not protected by the United States Constitution. What happened to desecrate our Capitol is irresponsible, disrespectful. It should never have happened, and we need to ensure it will never happen again.
Thank you very much. One thing I learned about you, switching gears, is that you were a finance major at this university. And this beautiful business school was not here when you were here. And I'm not calling you old, Governor. Just saying it wasn't here. But
I could walk when I was at the University of Texas.
That's
how long it's been. Yeah.
That says a lot. Well, that is a good lead-in to the question I have you about our COVID year. 2020. Obviously, Texas felt that more than other states because of the large population we have. And where I'm going with the connection between our COVID experience and finance is not only have we combated the disease, and I know you want to speak about that, but we also have had to combat weighing all of these competing goods, which is keeping our population healthy while keeping as many businesses as we can open. And you shared some thoughts backstage that I thought were very poignant about the necessity of continuing to keep those in balance so that 2021 can be a much brighter year for Texans and for Americans.
Right. Well, one thing we were talking about is how amazing this past year turned out. It doesn't matter which way you viewed what happened this past year. What happened was highly unexpected. And one thing that happened that was highly unexpected in the state of Texas this past year is, believe it or not, 2020 is going to turn out to be probably the most prolific year the state of Texas has ever had with regard to economic development. This began to happen in April. Let's go back in time and remember the time sequencing, and that is in February is when the first time that people were brought from those cruise lines to the Air Force medical hospitals in San Antonio, and then in March we had our first Texans test positive for COVID, and it was spreading across the country. Beginning in April, my phone started ringing off the hook by CEOs across the entire country, talking about wanting to come to the state of Texas and either relocate or move to the state of Texas and grow here, because they saw the way things were in the states that they were trying to flee from, and they saw the way things were going in the state of Texas, not just now, but they've known about the Texas brand long before now. And so first, there was the phone call with Elon Musk, and that began in April, and those phone calls continued for a while until the decision was made on his part to set up that large manufacturing facility, and candidly, what will turn out to be far more than that, over in the eastern part of Austin, Texas. And literally a week did not go by without me talking to a CEO. In fact, hardly a day went by without me talking to CEOs, talking about coming to the Lone Star State to come here and to grow their economy here. And I think we're going to look back and see, when all the final calculations are done, that Texas once again led the nation with regard to economic development. There actually is an award that is given out for this. It's called the Governor's Cup. Every year that I've been governor, Texas has won the Governor's Cup, ranking #1 in the United States for economic development. So it says something. It says something if we are going to, in a time of COVID, exceed what we've done in the past. And candidly, the way things are teed up right now, 2021 is going to be even better than 2020. We have an economic development team in the governor's office, and we have a lineup of more than 200 projects in the queue that we're working on right now. Now, you've heard about some of the big brand names that have come here. You know about Tesla that I just mentioned that came here. You know about Oracle relocating its headquarters here in Austin, Texas. You know about some of the projects that took place in Dallas, such as CBRE, a Fortune 500 business that moved its headquarters to Dallas, Texas. And you know about the Charles Schwab headquarters movement there. You know about the Hewlett-Packard headquarters move to Houston, Texas. Those are the headlines you know about. What you don't know about, perhaps, are the hundreds of other projects that took place in smaller communities. We wanted to ensure that every community in the state of Texas was benefiting from the economic prosperity that we have in the Lone Star State. And so whether it be a project in Seguin, whether it be in places like Commerce, Texas, or Greenville, Texas, or in fact, if you saw the news in Amarillo, that last week the Amarillo Economic Development Corporation said that last year was their most prolific year for economic development ever in Amarillo, Texas. So this isn't just something happening in 3 or 4 big cities. This is something that's happening across the entire state of Texas.
And congratulations, by the way, on that. Obviously, to you, our state leadership, legislature, business owners, of course, who are, as you know well, and don't have to hear from me, investing the capital to make that possible. Another really important part of that, and this is timely given that the legislature started this session this week, is placing the proper emphasis on the public policies that can sustain that. And so why don't you, if you don't mind, give us a crystal ball view of this session's policy priorities from your perspective that will allow that economic growth to continue in Texas.
Well, we have to ensure that we continue that economic growth, and there are several different things that are attracting businesses to relocate in the state of Texas that we need to continue. One, for example, is to make sure that we keep taxes low. One interesting story along this line is just yesterday, I was talking to another CEO. You've heard of the Fortune 500. This is one of the companies that's in the top 100 of the Fortune 500. And he was talking to me about the Texas model and pleased with regard to our regulatory environment and our tax environment. And he said, listen, what type of assurances can you provide to me that we won't come there and 10 years later we'll suddenly see an income tax? And I asked him how old he was or how much longer he expected to work. But I didn't let him answer, because I said it doesn't matter either how old you are or how long you're going to work, because I can assure you we are not going to have an income tax in Texas far beyond your lifespan, because what we did in Texas last session, we ensured that we banned an income tax by putting it into the Texas Constitution that an income tax is not allowed in the state of Texas. And he applauded just like that. So whether you're running a business in Texas or whether you're thinking about coming to the state of Texas, you want to make sure that the standards that we have in place here will remain in place here. And that's exactly what I want to achieve this session. I want to make sure that we are going to do to other issues like what we did to income tax, such as working on cutting regulations, such as working to make sure we make it easier for entrepreneurs to engage in their business. But I have to add this to you, because every year I've been governor, I've been talking to CEOs, and I've heard the same thing, and that is we want lower taxes, we want less regulations. We are coming to Texas because of the litigation reform. And then increasingly I begin to hear we're coming to Texas because of your superior workforce. But very interestingly this year, I heard something new, this year being 2020, so last year, I heard something new about an additional reason where businesses were pressing on the accelerator, accelerating the need to leave where they're coming from and come to the state of Texas. Almost all of them have told me that they are trying to flee the lawlessness that is occurring in their communities. And this is exactly why I am pressing on the accelerator, making sure that we do not allow cities in the state of Texas to defund our police. That is insanity. So this was an issue that I focused on in this past election for the state legislature to make sure that we were electing legislators who would support my proposals to make sure that we do not allow cities to defund their police. That allows the lawlessness, like what we've seen in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis and Chicago and New York, and the list goes on. Defunding and disrespecting police is the worst possible policy a municipality or a state could adopt. And in fact, you've seen city council members in Minneapolis. You've seen the mayor in Portland. You've seen other officials in these cities that defunded police to begin to walk that back themselves because they have understood that it is no longer tolerable in their communities. But my goal is to make it fiscally impossible for a city to defund their police. So how would you achieve that? I have a lot of ideas, and I'm going to be working with legislators on the ideas they think that are best. But I think the one that forces a city to choose between either bankruptcy or funding their police is the best policy. The way the law works in the state of Texas is municipalities, they receive the remittance to them of the sales tax revenue that is generated from their city. But it doesn't go directly to them, it goes to the comptroller's office first. And I'm seeking a law that would require the comptroller to hold in abeyance any remittance of the sales tax revenue generated, say, from like a city like Austin, Texas, to not be given to Austin, Texas, unless and until they step up and do the right thing, and that is to fund their police officers.
Two things. Number one, God bless you for that, for everyone who lives here in Austin, which remains a great capital city and the greatest state and the greatest country in the history of the world. I think also, though they won't be able to nod because they're in uniform, our Austin police friends here who always help us out, not just at TPPF, but you know that well, being a resident. So God bless you guys for what you're doing, too. And I'm sure, Governor, you can count on the Texas Public Policy Foundation supporting that idea. So maybe that's why you have a twinkle in your eyes. You knew that. We hadn't talked about it before, but absolutely sign us up, sir. And number two, just to come full circle, that's, as you said, that's one of the reasons people want to move here. Let me ask you a question. about that, though, because one of the reasons I like your Twitter feed is that sometimes with that smile on your face, you're posting Whataburger pictures. And the reason you're doing that is that you're trying to convince people who move here who left really failed regimes in other places that don't bring the values you've left behind, you've abandoned, and try to make Texas into what it was. You touched on that a little bit. My question for you is, that seems more of kind of a cultural and social issue, but is there something that can be done legislatively or through some other means that just addresses the concern we all feel that we don't mind new arrivals to Texas, we just want them to call themselves Texans?
Well, let me debunk two misunderstandings. One, if I'm posting a picture of Whataburger on Twitter, it's because I'm thinking about Whataburger and I want a Whataburger. Two is, I will tell you, every single day I hear concerns raised, kind of like along the lines of what you articulated, and that is, whoa, Abbott, slow down. The last thing we need are these Californians coming to the state of Texas, turning Texas blue. Well, think of all the people in the state, the last person who wants to see Texas turn blue is me. And I know for a fact, as I will explain to you, that the people who are coming from California are not going to turn Texas blue. Several reasons why. First, I talked to the CEOs, I talked to the people who are coming here, and they articulate to me exactly what their feelings and attitudes are. They are fleeing California for a reason. They're fleeing New York for a reason. They do not like the way that government is run in those states, and they like the way that's run fair. In fact, let me share something. This is going to be amazing.
Is it a Whataburger picture?
No, it's not, but it is something else. I haven't posted this on Twitter yet. Give me 1 second. Let me read to you. Someone sent me a message. I'm going to allow this person to remain anonymous. And you will not guess the name of the person, so don't even try. But it's a business leader who has already relocated to Texas from California. And I'm going to show you the mentality of the people who are moving from California. I'm going to read directly. It's 3 sentences in a message, and it's all a quote. This person says, "I am rallying Californians who moved here to be hardcore about fighting for Texas to remain Texas. They all agree in principle with this. Now it must be translated to action." He says, "The city of Austin is the worst offender. The degree to which they are trying to copy San Francisco, which is a failed city, is simply embarrassing." So that is the mindset of the people who are coming here. Separately, think about this for a second. If you are a person who is dependent upon government or wants to be dependent upon government, if you like the way that, let's say, California, New York, the way they approach social issues, the last place you would leave would be California, and the last place you would come to is the state of Texas. 2 more quick factoids. One is a factoid a lot of people don't know about. The first you will, and that is the stories you hear that Texas is on the receiving end of the most people moving from other states. So a lot of people move from California to Texas. Texas is the #1 destination of people fleeing California. But here's what you don't hear. California is the #1 destination of people leaving Texas. So you get it. And here's what it means. We're involved in a big exchange program. We're taking their conservatives and we're sending them our liberals.
Where can we donate, Governor? Where can we donate?
Hold on, because stories are not good enough. This is a crowd. This is a public policy organization. You expect data, and I have data. The biggest election contest we've had in the state of Texas since George W. Bush was elected governor was the Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. At the same time, I was on the ballot 2 years ago. And I was doing what we always do when I'm on the ballot, and that we were doing exit polls. And we did an exit poll, and we asked a question, did you vote for Abbott or his opponent? Did you vote for Cruz or for Beto? And then we do some demographic questions. Have you moved from California, or are you native-born Texan? Ironically, there was a media outlet that was doing an exit poll, polling different people, but still an exit poll during the same election. Two different polls, two different pollsters, different people across the state of Texas, the same mathematical result. 57% of the people who said they had moved from California voted for Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz got a larger percent of the vote of the people who moved from California than he did of the people who were native-born Texans. And so that is the mentality of the people who are coming here. That said, this is a long way of kind of getting to your question. If I recall your question, it was, what can we do to make sure that for those who may not be exactly attuned to the way we do things in Texas is, first, as leaders, we need to make sure that they're conducting their business consistent with the standards that we have, but it goes deeper than that. It begins earlier than that. One thing that I desperately want to see the Texas legislature pass this session is I want to restore teaching civics in the classroom of schools in the state of Texas. Focusing on Texas values, Texas exceptionalism, patriotism, the United States Constitution, the core values that have made Texas, Texas, so that we inculcate our students from the very beginning with a lasting impression of exactly why Texas is great, so they will go on to ensure that the next generation of leaders in Texas will perpetuate the exceptionalism that we all enjoy today.
Well, thank you so much for that. As you know, this foundation has not just worked on that, but made that a priority for many, many years. We've worked with you and your staff and legislators, some of whom I'm seeing beginning to pour in, Governor, on that. And while we will always say at the foundation that fiscal matters are really important, ultimately what you just described is upstream from those fiscal matters, right? Because if we lose the very ideal of Texas, the very ideal of America, it's almost immaterial what happens in those other respects. So we're grateful that you're going to be taking the lead on that. I want to piggyback on that question, Governor, and think about your priorities for the legislative session that just began. Obviously, there are a lot of things in any session that are good ideas that start competing with one another because of resources, because of calendar. That's especially true this year. I'm just asking you in front of this audience, not just a couple hundred here, but I think we probably have several thousand tuning in online. Get us a sense, a kind of inside view of your crystal ball priorities that we can expect to hear you talk about over the next few months.
I'm going to divide it into several different categories. One is we want to create a healthier state and healthier Texans, and there's several things and ways we can go about that process. One is by continuing one of the things that we expanded during the course of the pandemic, and that is expanding telemedicine. This is something that's proven to be very convenient for patients, very convenient for doctors, and it's something that's a good tool that will advance medicine. Now, another thing that we must do in the state of Texas is we must ensure that regardless of what may happen at the federal level, we need to ensure that all Texans will have insurance coverage for pre-existing conditions so that no one ever is in a situation where they are uncovered for pre-existing conditions. Secondly, we want to make sure we have a safer Texas. We've kind of already covered that, and that falls largely along the lines of making sure we protect public safety. Third is a freer Texas. Let me expand upon this a little bit. We want to basically erect a fortress that will ensure that Texas is going to be governmentally protected in a way that safeguards the core liberties that we are supposed to enjoy. We talked about this a little bit in the way we approached last session, where we passed this constitutional amendment safeguarding your taxation situation to make sure that you would never be subject to an income tax. I want to achieve that same thing with regard to your constitutional rights. For example, I want to make sure that Texas becomes a Second Amendment sanctuary state so that no government official at any level can come and take your gun away from you, despite those people who said, heck yes, we're going to take your gun. We're going to say, heck no, you cannot take people's guns away in Texas. Second, the First Amendment has two components to it. One is the free speech component. We've seen the way that there's been a cancellation of conservative speech in ways that I believe are unconstitutional. We've already seen legal efforts by the state of Texas to go after those who are canceling conservative speech, but we need to erect safeguards for conservative speech. And then the second component of the First Amendment is freedom of religion. Just like what I was talking about the Second Amendment, I want to see the same thing for the First Amendment. We need to erect barriers that safeguard our religious entities from having any government official at any level, from the president down to local officials, interfere with the right of any religious organization for them to conduct their religious affairs, like what we saw in other states and even at some locales here in the state of Texas during the time of the pandemic. It is unacceptable, and we must pass laws to safeguard and protect against that. Last one, I know I'm talking for a while, but let me...
You're on a roll, Governor. Keep going.
Let me go back. Let me go back in time to prior speeches of mine at TPPF, when I have on the TPPF stage talked about reinforcing the 10th Amendment. Reinforcing the 10th Amendment is essential now. Listen, under President Trump, in conversations with President Trump that I had, in conversations with Vice President Pence, who was a former governor that I had, they understood, they appreciated, and they respected the role that governors and states play in our constitutional republic. We had challenges with the president before that with Barack Obama. In fact, I still hold a record that will never be broken by anybody. I hold the record for the most lawsuits filed against Barack Obama. 31 legal actions against him. We had to because the actions he was taking trampled upon Texas liberties based upon the 10th Amendment. We need to go back to the fundamentals of the 10th Amendment and reassert that against any potential encroachments that we see under the Biden administration.
Well said. Thank you for that ambitious agenda. I also think it's very feasible. So as we get close to the end of our time together today, Governor, I want to ask kind of a big picture question. It's one that I've gotten into the habit of asking. We do these weekly live streams because you probably more than anyone in this room understand the burdens of the last year. Just given the position of leadership you're in, obviously a lot of CEOs in this room as well, they understand that regarding their businesses. My question is framed about optimism. Those of us who are conservatives, while we understand some of the silly actions of some folks in our movement, we're obviously not being condescending to them, but what we want to do is be optimistic about the future. And what I'm asking you is, what kind of message of hopefulness, of optimism might you give us, and what specific action steps, our homework, if you will, do you want to give us as we wrap up our conversation tomorrow?
Texans are unique in their sense of resilience. There is no event really that captures the sense of resilience more than the fact that at a battleground location, everybody loses their life, but it doesn't dent the yearning that those people have for freedom. Those people, where their fellow soldiers lost their lives at the Battle of the Alamo, they regathered, they fought on, and they showed resilience and perseverance and overcame that challenge to go on to lead to their independence, to win their independence, to form their own country, to become later the greatest state and the greatest country in the history of the world. That sense of resilience and perseverance has been passed on from generation to generation into the bloodstream of every Texan. And candidly, it permeates our state so much, it doesn't matter if you were born here or if you came here last year. You know that is part of the Texas DNA. And what I know for a fact from the men and women that I've talked to across this entire state. They are ready to get up and get going again. Texas is, we'll say, is rising again. We've already risen, having finished 2020 with the most economic development ever. But I would say you need to do one thing. You need to buckle your chin strap, because we're about to take off like a rocket ship, like never before. As great as Texas has been in the past, we're on the precipice of an even greater Texas. And all we need is the individual ingenuity that every Texan has, the work ethic that Texans have, the insistence on the freedoms and liberties that are guaranteed to us by God, that are enshrined in the Constitution. We all follow those things. We will ensure Texas is the national leader. And let me just end the statement with this point. Our fellow Texans, they need the Texas legislature to step up and lead in these efforts. But I will say more so this year than ever before. The United States of America needs Texas to lead the way and to show the way of what can be done. And Texas will lead our country over the course of the next year and over the course of the next decade.
Hear, hear. Governor, we're really fond at TPPF of saying, let's go charge some hills. And I'm just going to pledge to you that we'll charge a hill with you as you've outlined it, with legislators who want to do it. I can tell you there are hundreds of people, presumably thousands online, who are going to do that as well. So that's a way of saying, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your service. Thank you for your leadership. I hope you know that you have a special place in our hearts, because you're our governor of Texas, and our prayers are with you every day. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless you all. God bless the great state of Texas. Thank you.